Grace appears in the most unexpected places sometimes. In our reading today from Luke 16, 1 through 13, Jesus tells what might be the most perplexing parable in all of Scripture, where a dishonest manager is seemingly commended for his shrewd actions. At first glance, this parable challenges our understanding of integrity and righteousness. Why would Jesus, who consistently called for honesty and uprightness, tell a story that appears to reward dishonesty? It's a challenging passage, but as we'll discover today, this parable reveals profound truths. Through this challenging text, Jesus invites us to examine three essential aspects of faithful stewardship: about our relationship with God's resources, our connections with others, and our understanding of true justice. Our first theme emerges from the owner's realization that resources had been squandered. The text tells the owner accused the manager of wasting his master's possessions, the very thing he was entrusted to protect and multiply. What does it mean to squander in our own lives? Could it be missing opportunities God places before us? Allowing fear to prevent us from using our gifts? Failing to recognize the potential in ourselves and others? Or settling for minimal effort when we could do better? The antidote to squandering begins with awareness, a spiritual awakening to the reality that everything we possess is ultimately a gift from God. To not squander is to be aware that we have the potential to give something for the benefit of another. Our time, our talent, our resources, our relationships are all entrusted to us for purposes greater than our own comfort. Consider the Ignatian prayer of receiving, Sushepi. Take, my Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and call my own. You have given all to me. To you, Lord, I must return it. This prayer captures the essence of not squandering, recognizing that we have the gifts to share with others. We see examples of this principle in the weekly stories in the business section of Saturday editions of our papers like the Globe and Mail. There's always a story about someone who is raising funds or volunteering with a charity. The common theme of these stories is that the people involved have been moved to contribute to the well-being of others. Another common thread is their generosity, the giving of their time, their money, and their skills. Their giving not only helps someone else, but it gives back to them personally. We can relate. Think of the community built and the sense of accomplishment found when the group of people you're volunteering with achieves its goal. Or think of the friendship developed in the act of accompanying someone shopping or to an appointment, or to help in any way. In this passage, Jesus challenges us to think about how we use the gifts we've been given. He challenges us to examine a number of things. What gifts might we be squandering? What opportunities for kingdom impact are we missing because we've forgotten whose resources we are managing? The second theme emerges from the manager's surprising strategy. Facing dismissal, he doesn't hoard the resources or run away. He doesn't flee. Instead, he invests in relationships. He reduces debts, extends mercy, and creates goodwill among his master's debtors. And while his motives were indeed self-serving, Jesus highlights the importance of a truth that existed in his actions. Relationships matter profoundly in God's economy. The manager understood something many of us forget, that human connections often prove more valuable than material wealth. As Reverend Eric Parker wisely notes in a piece for the blog millennialpastor.ca, he says this: anyone who has lived in a farming community should know that good relationships with neighbors is vital to life on the land. What we really ought to be wondering about is why this land manager doesn't already have pockets full of favors and good relationships in his community. That's from Reverend Eric Parker. And this quote highlights that the manager put no effort into developing relationships. Why didn't he see this value? Do we know the value of community? Do we put enough time and energy into building relationships? Jesus himself modeled relationship building throughout his ministry. He invested time in the marginalized, listened to the overlooked, and created space for genuine connection across social boundaries. Even as the religious leaders watched critically, Jesus demonstrated that time shared with others, especially those society deemed unworthy, represents faithful stewardship of God's love. In our increasingly isolated world, building healthy relationships becomes a countercultural act of faithful stewardship. When we truly see our neighbors, when we truly make eye contact, be present, pay attention, create stillness for meaningful conversation, and practice deep listening, we are managing God's gift of community with wisdom. And here at Emmanuel, we strive to create spaces where such connections flourish, where everyone is seen, heard, and valued as bearers of God's image. This isn't merely social nicety. It's spiritual stewardship of the relationships God entrusts to us. Thirdly, the theme centers on justice, using our influence to create fairness and equity in a world of imbalance. While the manager's actions appear self-serving, they created a more equitable situation indeed. By reducing debts, perhaps removing the excessive interest that burdened the poor, he established a fairer arrangement. In this unexpected way, justice emerged from unlikely circumstances. Jesus repeatedly warns that we cannot claim discipleship while accumulating wealth at the expense of others. You cannot serve both God and money, he declares at the conclusion of his passage. The stark either-or confronts our tendency to compartmentalize our faith and our finances. Because justice in God's kingdom means making decisions that promote the well-being of our neighbors, taking actions to challenge systems of exploitation, even if it involves risk, using our privilege to amplify marginalized voices, and ensuring that our economic choices align with our spiritual values. The manager, facing crisis, finally takes actions that benefit others. His self-interest accidentally creates community benefit. So how much more should we intentionally pursue justice for others? Our faith calls us to embody fairness, equity, and honesty, not from desperation, but from gratitude for all God has extended to us. These three themes, stewardship, relationships, and justice, are woven together by a common thread of grace. The manager in Jesus' parable doesn't deserve condemnation. His prior mismanagement created the crisis. His solutions were self-serving. His methods were questionable, yet somehow good emerged from his actions. Debts were reduced. Relationships were restored. A measure of justice was indeed established. Isn't this the paradox of grace? That God can work through our imperfect, even misguided efforts to create redemptive outcomes in the end? The parable's power lies precisely in its discomfort. It reminds us that we are all, in some sense, dishonest managers, entrusted with God's resources, yet prone to misuse them. We are human indeed. We all face crisis of accountability. We all need creative solutions to the problems our own choices have created. The good news is that grace operates in this messy middle, not waiting for our perfect stewardship, but working through our stumbling efforts towards faithfulness. The master in this parable commends the dishonest manager, not because he approves of dishonesty, but because he recognizes the wisdom of investing in what truly matters when crisis does indeed come. The deep need for God's rich grace. Perhaps this challenging parable is ultimately about the nature of privileged humanity finding itself in desperate need. The manager, once secure in his position, facing the crisis of losing everything, from this place of need, not abundance, he finally makes choices that benefit others. Isn't this the journey of faith, my friends? To recognize that despite our apparent self-sufficiency, we are utterly dependent on God's grace. From this place of acknowledged need, we are empowered to extend grace to others, to manage God's gifts without squandering them, recognizing that all we have comes from and belongs to God, investing in relationships that reflect God's love, creating communities where genuine connection flourishes, and to pursue justice as people who have received unmerited grace, extending to others the fairness God has shown to us. Yes, this is a challenging passage, challenging indeed, but perhaps that's precisely why we need to reflect upon it. Easy passages of Scripture comfort us, difficult ones transform us. Perhaps the most profound lesson from this parable is that we are all interim managers of God's gifts. Our task is not to hoard them, but to use them wisely, to invest them in relationships that reflect God's kingdom, and to ensure that they serve the cause of justice. May we continue to be a community at Emmanuel that manages resources and relationships with compassion and kindness and welcome. May we manage our lives with wisdom, build relationships with authenticity, and pursue justice with courage. Thanks be to God.